their ancestors and carry it forward and find a way to connect to the culture. We can't bring back everything that we used to do. There's no way that technology is going to go away. You know, we can't go back to the times where we relied on dog sleds and no snow machines, no boats, you know, motorized boats, no vehicles, no airplanes, no internet, cell phones. So, but there's plenty of opportunity to connect to your culture, whether it be in the form of arts and crafts, our forms of spirituality, not the ones that have been imposed upon us. Dancing, language, definitely. I think that's because if we're continuing to only speak English, we are not connecting ourselves to where we came from, who our people were and are. And also just participating. I mean, even in the city, you can find ways to go harvest, you know, what might be traditional foods from back home. You could find those foods here. They're just going to taste a little bit different. Find ways to embrace in your culture by, you know, who you are, where you came from. And don't be ashamed of it, because when you're ashamed of all your people who had made sacrifices for you to be where you are today. And that's what I have 3 children that I have brought into the world. That's what I could hope that they do, is they embrace that they are Inuit. As a mother, my job is to help them embrace being Inuit and be proud of it and share it with others, because when we don't share, then that's where things get lost. They don't die. I think they just get lost. Yeah, I think just overall just embracing in any way that you can, instead of filling that void with something else that is not Inuit. I just hope that my family who have the opportunity to listen to this, that they embrace it and educate others, especially if they don't live in the state of Alaska, that it's an opportunity for education. And we are the ones who are going to change our school system.
Mukdoya takes this opportunity with Eskimo versus Inuit to educate others and her children about who we really are as Inuit people. I also snuck in some extra audio from, you guessed it, Holly Nordlum. I told you this wouldn't be the last you heard of her on Coffee and Clop. Anyway, Holly is one of the few people that I've met that has strong feelings against the word Eskimo.
We were in Greenland, and this Inuit woman was at our decolonization class, so we were talking about this same discussion, but in Greenland. And her husband came, and he was a white archaeologist, and he was like, we were sitting around having tea or coffee or whatever, and he said to me, we were just having this discussion last night, why you girls have such an issue with the Eskimo word. And I was like, first, like, why even bring this up at tea? Like, I'm offended by the Eskimo word when you use it.
Yeah.
My mom can use it because she had no choice but to embrace it.
Right.
But I don't have to embrace it, and you definitely can't embrace it. And then he's like, well, the people I've talked to. I said, dude, I am standing right in front of you as an Inuit woman telling you I don't like it.
Yeah.
Isn't that proof enough?
Yeah.
Like, it didn't sway him at all, motherfucker.
No.
I was like, that that's married to that pompous ass.
The Inuit woman married to him. Wow.
Yes.
That's so...
I was like, fuck him.
Yeah.
And I was like, I'm standing right here. I was like, I'm like half his size. He's totally like 6'5". It's like, I'm standing right here telling you as an Inuit woman, I don't like it. And you're going to tell me it's okay? I'm telling you it's not okay.
Right. You girls.
I know. You girls. Why even come? I said to the girls later, why do you even come? Just to discredit us. So that he can mansplain, white-splain us.
Yeah, that's so
Tell
funny.
me, white man, what should I think?
Yeah. Please let me know.
Tell me if I can use the E word. Yeah. This is where I come from. The history of the word wasn't ours. It was given to us at a time when we were marginalized.
Mm-hmm.
And really, like, now we're marginalized,
but
but not like we were then.
Yeah. No, yeah.
And we were subject to their views and their ideas very strongly when it was given to us. I don't fault my mom or that generation for using it. Mm-hmm. I get that they were at boarding school and that's what they were called and that's what they have. But I won't use it. I don't want to use it because I know better, and it was given to us at that time when we were marginalized so heavily. And in my own way of decolonizing how I think about us, how I am proud of us, how I am celebrating Inuit culture. That's just not something I want to perpetuate. It's that time when we were marginalized so heavily. That's where that guy came from, right? That guy who was behind me saying, "Who the fuck you think you are?" That's where he comes from, like that place where Eskimo started to be used, and he was hurt by that, right? That's the history I think of, and that's not something I want to perpetuate. When my mom says it, I don't correct her, but she's heard me say this little speech a few times, and she stopped saying it now too. So, I mean, once you know, then you're like, you can have time to think about it. And I never faulted another Inuit for saying, you do whatever. You do whatever's you. Yeah. But white guy who's educated should know better. Yeah. He can't call me that.
It's not so much to ask to be addressed in the way you want to be addressed.
Exactly.
So,
and maybe there are people who don't have a problem, but that's because they're not here yet. Because we're trying to bring something back. And even my mom, when she heard me say this on the phone to an interviewer, she's like, "I'm not gonna say it no more." She's like, "Oh, I never thought of it like that." I was just proud of who I was. I said, "I get that. I wasn't trying to shame you. You say it all the you go crazy." But for me, I'm not going to do that, and I don't let my kids do it. But also, Inuit is what we are, like, globally. I mean, that's what I'm trying to bring us. I mean, when you travel to these places, you realize, oh my God, what the fuck? I've been colonized so much, I think they're not us, and they're us. Right? They're my cousins. Like, I look and I see family there. I mean, seriously, they are my I just feel like I can't even believe they kept these people from... They
drew these lines.
They drew these lines and kept these people from me. Because I'm sorry I missed out on all those years I could have been sharing with them. And being a bigger community.
I think it is important to note that Holly's opinion isn't unique, and there is a lot of history associated with the title Eskimo, especially with our Canadian Inuit relatives. Which is why I'm so glad we got to score another interview for this episode with Inuit Fredland, who I caught on her way back to Rankin from Utqagvik for an arts festival. Here I asked Inuit how she introduces herself.
I just say I'm Inuk, which is person. I just introduce myself by my name. So I'm Inuit Leslie Fredlin. I live here in Rankin and Nunavut. My maiden name is Banyok Dean. I took both my parents' last names. So when I introduce myself, most of the time I'll say Leslie just because it's easier. I don't have to explain. So, but my first name is Inuit, and there are quite a few people who refer to me by Inuit. Others call me Leslie. I love both my names, but I guess when I introduce myself, I don't really go on to say what my ethnicity is because I just avoid having to have that conversation with people who don't know what an Inuk is or who the Inuit people are. But when it does come up, I just say I'm Inuk. I'm from Nunavut. Sometimes, depending on where I am, southern Canada or across the border somewhere, like I do end up having to say Eskimo because people get really stumped. They're like, "What? Inuk? What's that? Inuit? Never heard of it." So, then I do go on to say, "Oh yeah, I'm Eskimo," and they, "Oh," and sometimes I get a really big excited reaction because they've never met an Eskimo before. Or, if I'm in southern Canada, I might get a bit more of a sort of different reaction, and they'll start bringing up stereotypes. And sometimes you're dealing with excitement, sometimes you're dealing with ignorance. So I guess my way of going about it is just trying to avoid it. I am mixed race. I'm Inuk. And I'm also white. Like, my great grandfather moved to Canada from Sweden. And on the other side, I have a bit of just mixed European ancestry. I don't know, but I'm half, half white. So I feel like I kind of get away without having to explain my ethnicity so much. But I avoid it because I don't like seeing how people change. I'm just who I am. I don't always introduce myself with I just say, oh yeah, I'm from Northern Canada. It does get exhausting trying to explain to people constantly. And even Canadians, like I'm constantly explaining to Canadians, like, no, Nunavut, it used to be part of NWT up north. Like even a lot of Southern Canadians just have no awareness. Like I've had to tell Southern Canadians, yes, I'm Eskimo, which I feel is pretty silly. They should, get to know their country a bit better.
Yeah.
But I don't, I avoid it as much as I can because I just hate seeing how people change with it. Sometimes it's like, oh, wow, you're Eskimo. And like, they're so excited and it's like, okay, yeah, cute. Okay, yeah, thanks. Okay, bye. They're not excited to see me as a person. They're excited to see an Eskimo. It's kind of funny. But I never say, oh, I'm Inuk or I'm Eskimo. I'll only say it if I'm asked.
I mean, is that important to you as how other people address you?
Like Inuk versus Eskimo, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It doesn't bother me too much. I've learned a long time ago that, people aren't that educated on Inuit or Eskimo. So it doesn't bother me. It kind of also made me realize that I'm also sort of ignorant on many other cultural groups in the world. So, but I do take that effort to explain to them, like, Eskimo is not an Inuk word. It's a Cree word meaning raw meat eater. We don't identify ourselves as Eskimo. We are Inuit.
Inuyuk doesn't seem to be offended by the word Eskimo, but she doesn't feel particularly connected to it either. Here she explains her understanding of the meaning, history, and some of the reasons some Inuit are offended by the term Eskimo.
Doesn't bother me personally, and I try to see it as an educational moment to give people a bit more of that knowledge of the background and who we are and where we're from. We're such a small population globally. So, I take that as an opportunity just to educate a little bit. I don't go around and say, oh, I'm Eskimo. I'll start off by saying I'm Inuk. I'm from the Inuit people, and if they haven't heard of it, then I'll just say, oh, okay, you'll know us as Eskimos. So, I personally don't get offended. I'm more likely to be offended by someone's intent than an actual word they're using. Mm-hmm. But I also really understand that there's a very painful and negative emotion connected with that word for a lot of people. Well, one of the reasons is it's not our word. I think Eskimo is actually an anglicized pronunciation of the Cree word Isjima, and it means raw meat eater, which, eating raw meat is something I'm very proud of.
Yeah.
I love it. And I'm so proud that our food is so nutritious and healthy that we don't have to cook all the germs away. It's safe to eat raw. I'm very proud of that. But I think the fact that it isn't our word might be offensive to some people, but there's also such a negative history for Canadian Inuit and the word Eskimo. It was not in a neutral way, it was kind of just a very negative word. People spoke with it with racism and hate towards not my generation, but the generations before me.
Just as Jackie mentioned, the Canadian government didn't recognize Inuit names as proper identification and gave them Eskimo identification number tags to differentiate between individuals.
People who went to residential school, or it wasn't a pretty word, it was a negative word. And I'll talk a little bit about E-numbers. The government of Canada didn't identify Inuit the way they identified other Canadians. You know, we didn't have birth certificates. We didn't have identification.